And we call to order at 6:30. The council in committee meeting. Any disclosure of pecuniary interests? Seeing none. Moved by Charlene Jackson, seconded by Darrell McLaughlin, be resolved that the council and committee of the Township of Whitewater Region adopts the agenda for the June 3rd, 2015 meeting with the following changes. Delete agenda items 4A, 4, and 4A5. These delegations are not available at this time. 4A4. Yeah. Okay. Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried. Okay. Turn the meeting over to Councillor Olmsted. I'm getting a lot of trouble when you don't take measures. Yes? Sorry.
I was just wondering if we could get our two delegations done before we go through the rest of it. It was only a thought.
Start anyway, yeah?
Eh? Oh, okay. I don't think so, but anyway.
So, make it that way. How's that?
We'll now bring to order the Rec Committee meeting agenda. First on the agenda is the the gospel tent request from Cobden Park. Be it resolved, the Recreation Committee of the Township of Whitewater Region recommends the Council will agree to allow the Valley Gospel Chapel to utilize the Veterans Memorial Park from August 1st to August 10th, 2015 inclusive. An agreement is to be signed with the Township, and a copy or certificate from their insurance company indicating coverage for the meeting is to be provided to the Township. The tent is to be erected back to its original location between the tourist booth and the Presbyterian Church and be used only in the evenings. Locates from one call will be necessary 14 days in advance of tent setup. Any discussion? Councillor, it's funny how you get up here, you can't see. Councillor McLaughlin?
I'm just wondering, I think when the last discussion, when was the request last year? Did anybody, I think that's what we were asking about?
Hope?
It was the same time last year that was requested over the civic August long weekend holiday for 10 days. And council had decided to switch locations. However, I guess that particular location wasn't accessible enough for the patrons coming to the gospel tent meetings. That's why they've requested the original location back. I spoke with Mr. Cobb, I spoke with Mr. Winters, as well as Mr. Pilgrim from the gospel meetings, and it seems that the original location should be sufficient this year.
Councillor McLaughlin?
Just further to that, I'm just wondering, before that, it wasn't the August long weekend, was it?
No, correct. In my report, I did state that it was originally the last week in August, early September.
And that was the reason why it was moved to the other location.
Right.
Okay, I just to let the council know the past history of this. That's
great.
My main concern.
Any other discussion? Councillor Jackson?
I'm just wondering, in the certificate from their insurance company, should it indicate coverage for the tent placement and not just the meetings? Because if there's an injury with regards to the tent being there during the day and not the meetings, just to make sure that it's for the full week the tent is there rather than just for the meetings.
I could request that.
Okay. So we should probably change the motion with regards to that. Just change. If it's all right with the first and seconder. I think I'm the first.
You're the firster.
That's okay with you?
That's okay with me. From their insurance company, indicating coverage for the...
So what is the recommendation? recommendation from you?
To include in the insurance.
For the duration that it's up, not just for the meetings. The insurance should cover
For
the tent,
From August 1st to August 10th.
yes.
So the amendment we made was just halfway down. An agreement is to be signed to the township and a copy or certificate from the insurance company indicating coverage for the meetings and the location for 10 days is to be provided to the township. That's sufficient? Yeah? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Carried? Next on the agenda is Garden Lake boat launch issues. Be it resolved that the Recreation Committee of the Township Whitewater Region recommends that council direct staff to erect a day use only, no overnight camping, and no campfires allowed at any time signs at the Garden Lake boat launch. Any discussion? Councillor Jackson?
I would hope that this is the last that we see of the Garden Lake boat launch. I can tell you that when I worked in Ross Township, it was an issue then. There were signs erected, there was picnic tables, there was garbage bins put out and picked up. And the OPP, all the residents there are certainly or should certainly be aware of who they are to call with regards to any issues. And it is the OPP that they are to call if they have an issue with regard to any partying going on by young people. And I understand the young people are new, but the residents have been there for a number of years. And I think if those signs are put up, and if they come down, they should be put back up again. But hopefully I think we can direct staff, this should be the direction of staff, that this remains, and hopefully it doesn't come back on, because as you can see in the background, it's been brought up a number of times over the years in different councils. I know they don't have the Ross Township information here, but it was certainly brought up at that time as well. And it's time that we stop dealing with it and start enforcing it.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Christine?
Yeah, is that on? Further to that, this documentation goes back to 2002. Former CAO Dean Sorial responded to many different inquiries about taking the OPP avenue. Kids have been partying in remote beach locations certainly since I was a teenager, which is many moons ago. So other than there have been suggestions in the past about, no trespassing signs. Personally, I don't know if council feels that's appropriate on public lands. Further to what Councillor Jackson was alluding to, it's my understanding that at one point there were picnic tables, et cetera. Apparently they were taken apart and burned in the fire pit. And with no bathroom facilities there, I know of other similar situations where they have posted the signage that I recommended here in my report, whether people pay any attention to that or not. And also there is the issue, some cottagers had requested at one point, I believe it was 2007, to purchase the land from, or that particular strip, but that would make the water inaccessible for boats for many cottagers on that lake. So short of putting up signage and cleaning up the garbage and telling people to phone the OPP if there's a problem, I have nothing else to suggest.
Any other discussion? Councillor Mackay?
I used to own the land that butts up to the back of that, and a lot of kids, it's a good swimming hole there, and a lot of kids come during the day, so I wouldn't want to see it sold or closed off either. So it's a really nice little beach. That's it.
Okay.
reasonable to put the signs up, and possibly we could schedule possibly a weekly drive-by for garbage. And I'm not in favor of putting picnic tables in. If there's a problem, we just let the people bring their own chairs and look after themselves, but definitely taking away a recreational area or an access to public waterway is not something I would like to see happen.
Agreed. Yes, Councillor Rieger.
Just to add to that, I was down there Sunday, took a drive down there. It was clean and neat. There was 4 four-wheelers flew by me as if I was standing still. So, I mean, it's also become a recreation for the ATVs. So, but it's a nice little spot there, and I mean, I think it's got to be accessible.
Any other discussion? Do you want me to read the motion again, or is everybody okay with the motion? We're good? All in favor of the signs? Opposed? Carried? And now delegation from the MNR regarding the Cobden Walking Trail. Kirby Punt from the MNR to approach the stand.
have to douse the lights a bit.
Yeah. Just the house lights.
I'm gonna cancel it.
Okay.
Well, to start off, I'd like to thank Council and Mayor Johnson to allow me to come and present on the Cobden Walking Trail. Most likely everybody's been by it and knows that there's something going on down there, and this has been going on for quite some time. But it's a great opportunity to ask questions, and as I'm presenting, if anybody has a question, please open up right away. Okay. So in May 15th, 2013, I addressed or presented at the council here, and so today we'll just go through the presentation again. And there's been a little bit of addition to this presentation, but anyhow, it's pretty well the same. So I'll give you a little bit of history. It's a provincially significant wetland, and there's about 60 acres in size. Many rare plants and wildlife and reptiles and amphibians inhabit this area. Significant spawning habitat associated with northern pike and those pike that are found in Muskrat Lake. And it's pretty amazing to see when that wetland is flooded during the spring freshet, how the pike actually congregate in there, and it's just swarming. It's pretty amazing. And also it's an excellent water filter for the lake itself. Wetlands, really provide clean drinking water. And so how we got here, in 2008 and 9, Civitan, had done some brushing of the old berms that were associated with the sewage treatment plant creation back in the 60s, I believe. And what happened at that time was there was a road that was created from Highway 17 over to one of the berms. And I guess what they didn't realize at the time is that that became a HAD, so harmful alteration of fish habitat under the DFO protocol. And well, what that would do would keep the pike from coming up into the wetland and actually spawning, so it was reducing the habitat for pike that may spawn in that wetland. So we became involved through some concerns from the public, M&R and Department of Fisheries and Oceans, and we met on site with the Civitan rep at the time. So we started to come up with a remedial action plan that may help to restore this fish habitat, and one was to remove that berm from Highway 17 that over to the existing berm, and that would allow fish to actually go back and forth. What we didn't want to do is have that berm act like a dam, so when the water was high, the fish went up behind it, and as the water receded, the fish got trapped in there and they would die. Okay? So, but what we were looking at that time, there was some concerns. Well, we wanted a walking trail, you know, and try to encompass the people that are up on the top of the Forsters Falls Road and have access to get into Cobden without walking along Highway 17. And it's a great opportunity too to have that walking trail there. But we tried to look at the big picture and determine whether it would have a lot of validity to expand just a walking trail and try to show the significance of that wetland and how it relates back to, one, water quality, two, the wildlife that live in these types of environments, and three, how can we increase water quality that's going into Muskrat Lake. So that, at that time as well, NRTCO was actually having some issues of getting a fiber optic line into Forsters Falls Road. And this was a great opportunity if we could work together to actually get some of the walking trail done, but also meet the objectives of the NRTCO and the fiber optic. We also had at that time a stewardship coordinator in the county, Karen Stokes, and some of you may have known her from M&R. And we had an opportunity to apply for some stewardship funding in 2009 and 10, which was associated with wetlands and displays. So we were able to get about $7,500 at that time to start to put up interpretive signs that would help educate the public. And one of the main objectives, as I mentioned earlier, was education and interpretation. And having that type of spin, ecotourism across Canada is really growing. And you have a great opportunity here in Cobden with Highway 17. Many, many people come by here, and a lot of them stop, they take a rest, and they move on, or they congregate around town, you know, and use those little shops, and they want to expand their knowledge of Renfrew County, and great opportunities here. But understanding the importance of wetlands is a main concern with the general public these days, along with M&R, because just to give you an example, there's about 80 hectares of wetland that are destroyed every day or disappear from the world. Well, North America, believe it or not, but that's quite substantial, you know, and it doesn't take long before a lot of these wetlands are disappearing. And if we want to have good drinking water in the future, we're going to have to start looking at these more significantly. And, you know, the path from Forsters Falls, as I mentioned earlier, was a real push from the Civitan Club when this started. So some of the anticipated audience were the local schools. So we have the Cobden Public School, and to this day, they're still interested in getting involved in this project. Natural history clubs, ecotourists, tourists, walkers, local families. We've seen quite a bit of activity on the walking trail over the last 3-4 years. And it seems to be growing pastime. People want places where they can actually take a walk with the kids and get a little bit of exercise. And it's a challenge when you live in a community that's, you know, tight-knit, but no place to walk. And, you know, Highway 17 is not a great place to walk by. So, with these challenges that we were facing, we were able to use a lot of our partners to try to connect the Foresters Falls Road with the walking trail. So we ended up having to cross the Muskrat River. But what we also want to do is make sure that we don't create dams within the wetland or stop movement for wildlife. And by creating these platforms, these cement slabs, and getting the boardwalk up a foot or 30 centimeters off the ground allows easy passage for wildlife. Also, it can be inundated with water during the spring freshet and not be an impediment to fish movement. The municipality was able to use the engineers at JP2G to come up with a design that would meet the building inspector's criteria at that time, Jacques Benoit, and we moved forward with the engineered design. And as you can see on the bottom here, bottom right and top right, is it started out with just using flat roof trusses and a new eco-friendly type leg drill that's sold by Valley Window and Door these days, and it's just an auger that augers this pipe into the ground, and so it stands, the whole bridge structure stands actually on those augered pipes, which are good for like 5,000 psi. It's pretty unique. All the wood that you see up on the top left for the boardwalk was actually donated by Shaw Lumber. And there's approximately 350 feet of boardwalk, so that's quite a substantial amount of wood. Then, when we were creating that, the builders of the boardwalk were mainly the Ontario Rangers, along with our forest fire crew, and the Osprey program from Opeongo High School, so the grade 12 students. The railings were fabricated by Whitewater Welding, painted by a local hire here in Cobden, and bridge approaches and decking were finished off by our fire crew. And a lot of times what happens with our fire crew in Pembroke is that when September comes around and the fire season's almost over, they're chomping at the bit to find little things to do. So their bosses actually gave up some time to get these approaches and the remaining structure of the bridge completed, which was really good. Turtle nesting construction. This is February and March of 2013, and this is the Osprey program from Opeongo High School. And if you were ever to walk along the trail, you would probably see where turtles had nested in the past, but the nests were predated by either skunks or raccoons or dogs and cats. And this objective was to actually create a big sand pit out maybe 20 feet away from shore in the wetland, and get the turtles attracted to that area so they're nesting off the trail, and that way they're more apt to survive. So this went on, and this, yes, Hal?
How successful has that been so far? We must be monitoring that.
So we monitored the first year, and the first year of construction, there was activity in nesting and hatch.
Excellent.
Okay, and so what happens though, because the wetland is so soft, the sand starts to sag over time. They had created a huge structure out of cedar, and made a raft, a floating raft. And this was with the assistance of Bill Meisner's group, had come out and provided the sand, but the students actually hand bucketed all the sand out onto this platform. Beautiful structure at the start, but now it's sagging and it needs a little more help. where we can build it up again and hopefully get those turtles continuing to use that nesting structure. So this has been used in other construction activities around the county where you might want to get them away from water crossings where there's some construction, especially important to road superintendents and construction companies where they have to mitigate for. We have 4 species at-risk turtles in Renfrew County, believe it or not, and some of them right here in Whitewater. That it's an easy opportunity to help to mitigate and get turtles away from our water crossings. So in these pictures here, you can see that on the bottom left, they actually use pallets to create a walking structure out to the platform. And then as they started to infill the platform, it began to sink. And I believe when they were finished there, it started to sink on the ice, but it's probably about 6 feet of muck in that pond. So that's why we can add a lot more sand to it. Yeah. And as you can see in the top left, it's quite deep there. And, you know, we have to follow the safety guidelines and everybody's tethered together, but it's still very important that we be safe. So anyhow, you can see on the bottom left that they've created this platform and then added a tarp on top and the sand just to try to make sure that it would stabilize and stay in one place. And as you can see, there's some of your employees here in Whitewater working and assisting. This was a great venture, and it showed how we can all work together to get some very worthwhile projects done. On the bottom right, you can see how high the sand is situated, but now it's only about a foot tall, so it's really sagged. And so there was the class of 2013, and we do have another class out there now, but other priorities at this time. So as you mentioned, Mayor Johnson, the nesting structure, you know, it's stabilized, but hopefully it reduces some of the mortality that we've seen in there and enhances a lot more of the wildlife that, you know, as we get more visitors around here and ecotourism, those are things they want to see. Not only just the birds, the unique birds that are in there, but it's all the other wildlife that are actually using this wetland. So in 2013, we had these signs, as you can see, and what was significant about these signs is they probably took 6 months to make and design, but each one of those signs is worth approximately $2,500 because they're specially coated, they're UV protected, waterproofed, etc. Also, the signs on the far right were to try to reduce some of the vandalism and some of the issues that we're having on the trail at this time, and I'll talk about that a little further on. However, what we see with these types of signs is it's a good education component, and if we were to move on with phase 2, this was phase 1, that we would see a lot more interpretive signs talking about individual species more and what people might see within this wetland that they're looking at. Cleanup's continuing to ongo. We still have some fiber optic cable that could be placed in the ground as opposed to lying on the surface, just to make it look a lot more tidier than it is. The footbridge, this is associated about halfway down the walking trail, the first part of the walking trail. That breach needs to be filled in so the water actually starts coming towards Forster's Falls. Right now, it's flowing the wrong direction, but we plan on trying to get this filled. And some of the other issues on the bottom right at the time were, yeah, we create a walking trail and we get people using them, but then we have people that want to kill wildlife. And this was a beaver, actually, that had been killed on the walking trail. So restoring balance, we have a compartment breach, and what I mean by that is that when the sewage treatment plant went in, these compartments were built to try to reduce nutrients going down out of the wetland and into Muskrat Lake. It's a well-known fact that there's very few sewage treatment plants out there that totally reduce all the nutrients, especially at an older facility. The newer facilities are much better at it, but when a wetland is working properly and the right vegetation is in it, it can help to absorb those nutrients before they enter a water course. And those are some of the challenges that we see in the wetland right now, is trying to get the compartment restored so we get the proper wetland vegetation growing in there that'll help to reduce the phosphorus and the nitrogen and some of the loadings that are coming out of the plant. And this is a great opportunity to before an upgrade ever happens, to actually get that wetland working to your advantage. And it's right there and very cheap and affordable. And we also have a bunch of invasive plants that are growing in there, and if we were able to actually restore that one compartment, we would probably reduce a lot of the invasive species in there. Manitoba maple, I don't know how many know that it's actually an invasive species, but there's many other aquatic plants that are growing in there, or herbaceous plants, the ones that grow out of water. You can see poplar growing in places where they shouldn't be growing. But as you get that water up, and it's not a lot, you start to actually get maximized filtration and reducing of nutrients. And we'll get more wildlife using it. So some of the ongoing challenges that we see right now is support, and so it comes and it goes, and that's a given. And vandalism this past year has been pretty amazing. And what I mean by that is that we had those signs removed from the ground, and one was thrown into the river, as you can see in the bottom, well, both pictures. That in the top right is actually the butt of one sign floating in the river, and that's what the sign looks like on the bottom. And those were removed by the Civitan members and the MLA in April. So there's still one sign missing. That's $5,000 right there. And the vehicles driving on the boardwalk during the winter have pretty well damaged every board on the boardwalk. Four-wheelers have been rooting up the gravel, and both summer and winter. And so those are challenges that we all need to work on, and how we limit that, how we get rid of that. Or, you know, this is not going to look good with our partners because they thought they were doing the right thing here, and it's just a challenge that I think we can all work together on. So just to recap, you know, it's a walkway, boardwalk intended to provide educational and outdoor experience for elementary, high school students in the Cobden area. Ecotourism is growing all across Canada, and being along the Trans-Canada Pipeline, there's a great opportunity for tourism here within the municipality itself. We had over 27 partners. Now that's increased by 4 more. So there's about 31 partners that have been involved in this. We also actually have the Muskrat Lake Watershed Council, but the Lake Association, who want to get involved. They have money actually to work on this year and to move forward. But what they've got to realize is that this is municipal land, and they need approval through the municipality to move forward. And what they would like to do is move forward onto the Phase 2. And the Phase 2 would be actually fixing up that breach that's in there and trying to restore the water and look at more interpretive signs and creating a link along that berm. which I think is really doable. That was the plan right from the get-go to enhance this opportunity. So, but again, that's up to council and your approval. The Osprey program from Opeongo High School has done some really good work down there, and they would like to continue to do work when they can. And I believe it's a true model, of having everybody work together. Look at 27 partners. And if you were to look at the amount of money that's come from those partners just to do that little walking trail, well, you guys know how far 200,000 goes. Not a long ways, right? But this was our sponsors to date on this walking trail. And it's quite substantial, but at the bottom right corner gives you sort of dollars put along with in-kind support. And that was 2013. So, it's probably far greater than that now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Punt. Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Punt? Yes, Councilor Mackay.
Do they not have any kind of posts or barriers that skidoos and four-wheelers can't get on that boardwalk, or?
Yeah, that's something that we could definitely look at, but we need the support of the council to do, like the municipality, right? So we put signs up. There's no bylaw to keep or enforce people to stay off there. Even bicycles can be a challenge. Cutting grass can be a challenge around these structures. But I think, once we start to establish or reestablish the flows of the water and in some cases get that natural flow moving, we'll actually reduce some of those trees and things that shouldn't be there and get more aquatic vegetation. But when it comes to the berm, we have snowmobilers that were using it in the winter. This has been a challenge over the last couple years. And four-wheelers, the amount of broken boards on the boardwalk is amazing. So yes, I agree that if we had something that they zigzag through, but we also have to make it wheelchair accessible.
Yeah, so you'd have some different angles.
Yes.
Christine?
Thank you, Chair. Could I suggest that we contemplate scheduling a special recreation meeting to have one item on the agenda and just spend some time, maybe invite some of the partners, perhaps Kirby could come back in and walk through moving forward steps?
I think that'd be a great idea, and maybe include a walk for some of the council members down on the trail as well.
That's a great opportunity because we did that with council the first time around. I think it's great to do it again.
Councilor McLaughlin?
I think if you were going to do that, I'd like to see the Muskrat Lake Landowners Association invited as well, because there was quite a bit of money earmarked to work there. Kirby, I think you know some of that money. There was, I know in the discussion at the Civitan meeting, they talked about putting money, and but I agree with what you're saying is we need to do some more in-kind processes. I think that's what you're looking from council. Is that correct?
Yes, I agree, and we also want to take that clear, consistent approach. We don't want to, have the cart before the horse, and we want to make sure that everybody's on the same playing field. And if somebody here has gets a question from a resident of Whitewater, they're able to answer that. Right? I think that's where we want to be with this.
And also, when you were talking about the grass cutting, I was down there. We did some trimming along the walking trail. Maybe we need to be more educated in what we were doing.
I think we need to go there.
Okay, that's because we thought we were doing what was asked of us at that time. But anyway, we need to, and I agree with what Christine's saying. Get a meeting and get everybody together, and so everybody's on the same playing field.
Any other questions? No, thank you.
I guess, is there a proposed date to come back, or are we looking at some of the things, because I know think Councillor McLaughlin said that, and Kirby said as well, that the Muskrat Lake Association is looking at spending some money there this year. Should we have that meeting sooner rather than later?
Probably, and I think when we get into 5B6, summer meeting schedule, maybe we could address it there, once we figure out how we're meeting this summer, what we're doing.
I'm just thinking with Mr. Kirby Punt here, that we could look at dates while he's here so that his availability.
My availability is going to be challenged because this is no longer my duties, but if we can make it after hours or on a Saturday, I'd rather do it after hours. It'll be a lot easier. On top of that, there's funding that I've secured that I've put away with local establishments to help to keep this going. And it would also be nice if we could come up with some like for like, you know, and it's not going to take a lot to keep this moving. But as you've heard from Councillor McLaughlin, there's money out there that's associated with this improvement, but it's not enough to finish it. And, you know, but there's ways around that. And we just got to keep the momentum going because I don't think we want to stall it any longer. And so I propose like the end of this month at the latest. And something else to keep in mind, that it's a very sensitive area at this time of year. And this is why we've told them that we would not provide them with work permits in there from natural resources because of the sensitivities. You have many bird species that are nesting right now. You have turtles that are nesting right now. And we just don't want to be rooting around in there and causing more harm than good. And so by keeping it sort of focused on phase one, that main trail, we're doing the right thing. And then as we, say, get into August, that's probably a better time. But we can go there anytime to look at the objectives, right? And where we want to go.
That's what I was thinking, if we could set a date soon so that those planned projects can be then planned either, you know, the ideal time. And I don't know if the ideal time is July or August or September or October. But
the best work time is August.
So how about we look at the schedule when we get there and we contact you for what would be the best time? Great.
But if you want to see the uniqueness of the wetland, the time to be there is now.
Right.
Okay, so there's no reason why we can't go earlier to see what's going on and then how we scope it going forward.
Okay, just in the interest of moving the meeting along here, I'm going to cut it off there. Thank you.
So we're not going to set a date then while he's here?
I don't think we're going to get our heads wrapped around every eight, 9 people setting a date. Unless you want to give us a date that we can all do a walk.
I don't have a calendar here, so I can't do that.
Saturday, June
27th?
I think it would be better in an evening.
So that's what I mean. Why don't we get back to you with a date?
So Christine will look after that?
Christine will contact me.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Can I suggest that Councillor Mackay go first, because he has a delegation with Jason Davis, move item 6C1 to now, and move 5B7 directly after Jason Davis' delegation, and we'll get the delegations over with, and then, because I see that they're both here. So I'll let Councillor Mackay as chair instead of corporate services.
Okay, do what we need. Oh, yeah, my name. speaker is Delegate Jason Davis from the Forestry, GIS, Renfrew County, noxious weed. Did I miss something?
No, you're fine, thanks. I'm just trying to set this up right now. Okay, sorry, on this side. It's a little different than mine. Okay, thank you. So again, my name is Jason Davis. I am the manager of Forestry GIS, and also, as other duties, is assigned as the area weed inspector for Renfrew County. Within our department, we also have trails. We also have civic addressing and 911. So it just gives you kind of an idea of my job as the area weed inspector is not my only job here. And I think the reason why I was called to this council was a number of reasons, was the giant hogweed issue you have in your municipality and poison ivy. And we'll talk about that later on in the presentation. So the Weed Control Act, I am mandated to enact this Weed Control Act. And so what I'll do is I know it's a dry topic. Weeds, I can't make this any more exciting, can't make legislation any more exciting, but we'll go through these 10 slides and you can ask questions whenever you want. But the Weed Control Act essentially states that all property owners are responsible for destroying, and the key word here is noxious weeds, on their property, unless the weeds or weed seeds are deemed by the weed inspector to be far enough away from any lands used for agricultural or horticultural purposes. And they do not interfere with that use. So the key two words here is noxious weeds and agricultural and horticultural uses. So I'm directed to follow this. I think there could be a misunderstanding about my roles and responsibilities, and I'll go a little further on here. Oops. So the intent of the Act, and I'll just kind of go through it. I know it's kind of dry, but I'll just go through these 3 points. Is to reduce the infestation of noxious weeds, again this word noxious weeds, that negatively impact on agriculture and horticultural lands. Plant diseases by eliminating plant hosts, such as common barberry and European buckthorn, and health hazards to livestock and agricultural workers. And this is, I look at this as a common sense act, where it's trying to look after the farmers and the farming activity and community. So again, the key word was the noxious weeds. So I can only act as the area weed inspector when it's dealing with these 25 noxious weeds. And so what I've done here is I just listed them in alphabetical order, and you'll notice here the highlighted yellow. These are not new ones, but these are noxious weeds that are not in Ontario yet, or they've just started. So it's kind of interesting to see there's 25 noxious weeds on the Ontario list, but only 15 are actually in Ontario. So it's a combination of noxious weeds and invasive species. I'm going to kind of highlight the new one here is the dog strangling vine. It's a very hazardous one where it can actually strangle plants. It'll kill a tree. It's that powerful. And the new one down in the Leamington area as a number 14 is the kudzu. This plant in optimal time grows 30 centimeters in a day. So what will happen in a normal year, up to 60 meters this plant will grow, and it'll overtake everything, including plantations, crops, you name it, it just grows. So that's why those ones are on the list. But my next slide is going to show you is, some people might be aware of this. Farmers in this group and maybe in the audience might follow the noxious weed list. So as of January 1st of this year, there were 9 new noxious weeds added to the list. Again, you see that kudzu there and some of these other ones. And then in their wisdom, the province said, well, if we're going to add weeds to the list, we'll take 9 weeds off. And these are 9 weeds that are fairly common in this area, especially the wild carrot. You see wild carrot all over the place, Russian thistle and Scotch thistle. So those are off the list. And the reason why I'm kind of emphasizing these noxious weeds, I, as a weed inspector, can only do my duties just on these lists, this 25 noxious weeds. So keep that in mind. Again, so when I get a call that has to be from or has to affect agricultural or horticultural crops, the complaint, because it is complaint driven like most things, it has to come from a farmer. It has to affect their farm. and it must be a noxious weed out of that 25 list. It has to, when I go out there, when I get a call, I go out there and verify a certain weed, and if it is a noxious weed, then I can act. If it's not, I have to say, sorry, I can't help you. I think that's where the miscommunication or misunderstanding is in my role. If any weed comes up, the noxious weed inspector will look at it. Go ahead.
I'm just wondering, Jason, why did they take those weeds off of the list if they're still noxious weeds? I know wild carrot is quite a problem.
It is quite a problem. Their thinking was for the pollinators. These are great for the pollinators, bees, and so they've taken these off the list so people aren't destroying these, so they're trying to help the pollinators, the bees. That was their mindset. So other than that, you have to ask the province.
Just a comment, I couldn't see why, because I know wild carrot can take over the whole...
Can take over a whole field.
Fairly
quickly, for sure.
I had to call 2 years ago on my neighbor. I have a cottage that's about 8-acre field and it's full of weeds. And I don't know if any of them weeds were in there, but the weed inspector came and made her cut them weeds. There's my farm on one side and my neighbor's farm. We spend money to spray and to eliminate weeds, and then you have somebody with an acreage spraying weeds.
Yeah, and that's where my role comes in, the area weed inspector, where you have somebody to contact, which then I can enforce the Weed Act and say you must destroy these weeds.
Yeah, I can't remember the guy's name, but the guy before you.
Mr. Muzzy.
Yeah, and
yes.
He came and told her to cut the weeds.
Yep, that's part of my role. That's part of my role and responsibility, is to enforce the Weed Act by not making, but asking them to destroy the weeds, and then further through the process, if they don't do that, you can do a weed control order. So, which I don't like to go through there, and if it goes beyond the weed order, they disobey a weed order, then it gets even higher up in the escalation, which is not a fun sight. So again, one thing that's not here is I do not, and this is again the misunderstanding, you don't see anywhere where I will remove noxious weeds. I think some of your workers were wondering when they called me about giant hogweed. They were all excited saying there's a giant hogweed. And they sent me pictures and I verified it. Yes, it's a giant hogweed. And then the next question is, what are you going to do about it? I go, oh, for sure, I'll help you out. I will give you some information how to deal with this giant hogweed. And I don't think that was the answer they were looking for. So, but that's why my job isn't to remove it, but to help out and to enforce this act. Again, this is just a sample of a weed order I did. Sorry.
I was just going to say, all we needed to do was cut the weeds where the seeds wouldn't spread. And I was quite happy with that, and that seemed to be all.
For giant hogweed, I do.
No, this was just for common weed.
Yes, for common weed, before the flower comes to fruition or it comes to seed, you can cut it to slow the process down. Cutting the mechanical harvesting or mechanical delaying of this will not solve the issue. It just delays it. Yeah. So yes. Again, this is just a weed order, just to show you what it looks like. Highway 417, a farmer complained about a number of, you see right here, wild carrot, Canada thistle, sow thistle. This is last year. And so MTO said, instead of asking me, just write me a weed order. And this is what it looks like. Again, this is kind of common knowledge. Controlling these weeds, these noxious weeds, what I can do is I can offer services in the sense this is what you can do. You can mechanically destroy, like digging it up. I think for giant hogweed, I recommended you actually cut the plant while it's small, bag it in a garbage bag, and then if you can, dig that taproot out. Giant hogweed has a taproot about 3 to 4 feet long, so if you cut it, it's going to come back. So if you can try and get that taproot, even better. Hand tools. This is when things are small. Like there's situations in your municipality for poison ivy. You have kilometers of poison ivy. I'll show you a slide where I have, I think it's Calange Lake Road, where the whole road system is poison ivy. But anyway, I'll keep going, sorry. So the mechanical way, you can tractors, mowers, brush hogs, do it by hand. Again, this is just for small areas. It's somewhat effective to slow things down. You can use chemicals. But we have to remember Regulation 6309, the cosmetic pesticide ban. So that really curtailed the use of certain pesticides, and I won't go into details because I'm not a specialist. All I know is if I had to use pesticides, I would need a license. If your staff needed to use pesticides, I do believe they need to use a license or have a license. You have to have the proper equipment, the proper training. The county does not have a spray program. and we don't have a licensed person to use these chemicals. So if you're going to ask me the question, does the county have this? We do not have a person with a license. Again, because I came here basically because of giant hogweed, we know the seriousness of this, and it's funny, today I got a call from Mayor Murphy from Bonnechere Valley explaining how giant hogweed is actually in social media around this area, on Facebook. There's people are thinking giant hogweed is there, and probably is, but it's in social media, so be aware for staff and council that in social media, it's out there, and people don't know what to do when they think they have giant hogweed. And one example we could do, they can contact myself, your municipal staff can go out there to look at it, to verify it, but it's very dangerous though. You've seen the PR before, many years ago. The crazy thing about this is photosensitizing compounds. I'm not going to name this compound. When it reacts with your skin or gets on your skin and it reacts with UV light, it actually changes your DNA of that area and creates these burns. And this is, sorry about the coloration here, but it is disgusting. And in certain situations, it can blind you if it gets in your eye. So treat with caution for your staff. Hazmat suit up if you're going to use hand tools. Just be very careful. Yes, it's not fun. And this isn't the only one. What happens here, Mayor?
In our municipality, we also have a lot of wild parsnip. And wild parsnip is very similar to that approach, and it's very common around signs where we send our students to cut and whatnot. I believe probably there's a lot of caution taken. But one of the statistics that I was told a couple of years ago was that they were up to 30 people a day at the height of the season in Renfrew County that were admitted to the hospitals with these type of burns and whatnot from these things.
For sure.
And it's not just hogweed. It's
so it's not just hogweed. You're perfectly correct. It's not hogweed. It's wild parsnip has the same photosensitizing chemicals. You have in this, more importantly, more numerous than giant hogweed and wild parsnip is cow parsnip. Cow parsnip looks a lot like giant hogweed. It looks almost identical. I had about 30 calls last year. I have giant hogweed in my property. For sure, I'll go out there and look. I looked at it. It's cow parsnip. But the thing is, it still reacts the same way. It still has these chemicals that will make burns. So not only do you have your poison ivy, your giant hogweed, the list is going on and on about these critters, I call them, that can really hurt you. Yeah, for sure. Very dangerous. So just use caution and use the proper equipment. I recommend any staff, if you interact with it, equipment, and then throw it away. You can buy these equipment, these coveralls you just throw away. This is just one example. I'll kind of go through a whole process with you right here. So this is in your municipality, Kalunge Lake Trail. And last year I got 1 or 2 calls from a ratepayer up there saying, I've got poison ivy, it's a noxious weed. I go, yes it is. Can you come out here and take a look at it? So my process is, I go out, I verify it's a noxious weed. Yes, it is poison ivy. It's common. It's noticeable. You can see it all along this roadway from almost end to end. My next step is to take a drive and use GIS and mapping to take a look around. How close is it to the closest farm? It's not close to any farm in that area. The complaint wasn't a farmer either. I contacted your staff saying that you have complaints about poison ivy in your municipality. Then I call back the ratepayer saying I cannot do anything for you. And that's the answer they do not like. It's not in the job for the area weed inspector to enforce. I can't enforce if it doesn't affect agricultural areas, and the person wasn't happy. I understand that, but I can't do more than...
Is Kalunge Lake Trail our road, or is that a private road? Okay. It's our road.
So that's just a quick example of my kind of duties when I come out for a call. You verify it, you look around, verify that being a farmer, and then those are the kind of steps I look at. And then once the check marks go yes, 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 and then I can start making action saying, recommend to talk to the person, can you, either the owner of the property as in Whitewater Region, or the farmer and say, could you remove this please, whatever way you can. And I'll give you examples how to do it. And this is one question, these stats are a little out of date. But you'll see Brant County, they hire contractors, people like the weed man, where they have the license to do the spraying, to handle these chemicals. Same idea with York Region, Northumberland County, and then Simcoe. Again, they're out of date, but it gives you an idea of the money they're spending for weeds. And I think this is more for poison ivy actually, poison ivy control in these counties. So they're putting something in their budget every year just to try and control poison ivy in certain areas. And right now, you can go on most of your more rural roads, I bet they're littered with poison ivy. I think Indian Road is covered right now. I drove by there the other day just to drive by, and it's covered. It's creeping into the center of the road. Not that bad, but it's creeping in. So this gives you an idea what other municipalities are doing, and that's basically what I have. And that's, again, to kind of clarify my roles and responsibility as the area weed inspector.
On that Clunge Road, that's close to the river, so you might not be able to spray there even if you wanted to.
Spraying creates a whole unique problems. When you spray, if you do go in a spray program, you have people that want these noxious weeds or these weeds removed, but then you have other people that don't want the chemicals near them. They're too close to the well.
Yeah.
If you have an organic farm, how could that affect my organic farm if you spray there? So as a council, you have to make a decision where and when or if you actually use a spray program or not. Again, for the County of Renfrew, we do not have a spray program. I talked to our Director of Public Works, Steve Boland, today just to verify that. So whenever there is a call, or if I give the county a weed order, it'll be mechanically removed by a brush hog or by a mower. So that's something to think about.
The poison ivy and mechanical removal for our employees is also quite dangerous, because you can sharpen the blades on the bush hog a week after you cut poison ivy and have complete body coverage and so forth. It's spraying also, in order to kill the poison ivy, you have to understand that the spray you're using is a total coverage spray. Anything green's not going to be green.
Yep.
It has to be very strong to kill poison ivy, correct?
Very strong. Very strong.
So it's a very difficult problem.
It's a huge problem, and it's a conundrum for municipalities. Yes, you want to help your ratepayers in certain areas, especially with poison ivy, but then you have to look at the flip side and for your staff and for other issues too. Absolutely. Excuse me.
That where does that hogweed come from?
It's originally from Asia, and is brought in as an ornamental. My first experience with giant hogweed within Renfrew County, and I was helping the area weed inspector, the previous one, and we went down McNabb Braeside. It was in somebody's garden. So it's kind of funny. You look at it. Do you understand how dangerous this plant is? Well, it looks nice. It has these big leaves the size of this table. It's a great shade tree, not tree, but a shade for my shady area. But then they throw the clippings and the seed heads in the ditch, and then there it goes. So it's an ornamental at first, and then it starts spreading. And the numbers, again, 20 to 30 calls last year. Out of all those calls that I had for giant hogweed, none of them were giant hogweed. Cow parsnip. Very similar. Everybody will probably go home tonight and Google the same thing. Cow parsnip and giant hogweed, and you'll see they're both big plants. I saw a cow parsnip that was over 6 feet, 8 feet tall. But giant hogweed is very distinct, very serrated edges on the leaves, purple splotching on the stems, hairy bristles, very distinct characteristics. While cow parsnip is different, and you'll know once you start using it and seeing it, you'll notice a difference. Nope. Whitehead, you're thinking of wild parsnip. Wild parsnip is that plant you see, especially near the fall or later on in the season. It looks like wild dill. Oh, that's nice. You drive on Highway 41. Look at all the dill here. It's not dill. It's wild parsnip. So now that it's been added to the list this year, wild parsnip, I'm expecting a number of more calls than ever, than last year or the previous years, because wild parsnip, as you mentioned, is everywhere. So, it's gonna be a busy summer for me on top of my other duties, trying to buy a CP corridor.
Very much.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, that's it. Well, we're moving all over. Bring your sign. You don't want people to think you're Hal. Oh, yeah. Shit.
I don't know, you sitting here?
And all you have, the trick to this is
Brian's probably gonna
you're
need
gonna
to
have to pull it back and make sure you're right on that.
Okay, we'll go ahead with item 5B7, the delegation for the Muskrat Watershed Council, proposed expenditures for the $5,000 grant request.
Thank you. I'm here tonight with Andrew Laird, who's Director of Recreation and Tourism. And in our gallery, we have Evelyn St. Amour, who's our acting chair. And yeah, as you mentioned, I guess we're here tonight to discuss and present in more detail our request for funding from the township. And the person who wrote the letter is Julie Truelove. Everybody get a copy of the letter that we sent? And it had a summary of what we're proposing to spend the money on. And that was prepared by Julie Truelove, our Director of Fundraising, who's doing a wonderful job. We just haven't landed anything yet. But unfortunately, she couldn't be here, but she has provided me with some notes that I'm going to refer to in making this presentation. So we've divided our funding request into two areas: funding project funding activities, and I believe that was as a request from council, and as well as the importance of capacity building and outreach. In our funding activities, the way it's on the one hand, I'm the Director of Science and Water Quality, and what we're doing is we're still waiting for the results of our first monitoring year, 2014. The results of that monitoring work will probably be available this month, and we're hoping to have a science night in the near future to present it, as well as a phosphorus budget that's been prepared by the Ministry of the Environment. It's very current and very detailed. So our knowledge of the watershed is getting more and more, but it's ongoing. It's like your landfill site. You need to monitor it and learn about it. But at the same time, there's a need to demonstrate that you're actually doing something. You know, you can't can't wait for the science. You gotta get out there and do things. So what we've done is we've had people, Karen Koulis from our agricultural committee, and she's got a group of from the farming community that she's worked with, and Julie Truelove and myself with some people from the science committee. We've met on a few times, and what we've drafted a document that's going to help us guide our decision making and build an accountable process for identifying projects that we want to realistically achieve in the short term. And what we've decided to do is focus on activities that are described in the letter, but they'll focus on watershed issues related to soil erosion, shoreline buffering, and agricultural municipal drains. And these are all more agriculturally related watershed items, and many of which are actually outside of your jurisdiction. But that's one of the challenges you have, is that, you know, a lot of the sources of the nutrient loading are actually outside of the municipal jurisdiction of your municipality. So if we can do our bit to try and mitigate those sources, it's a benefit to Whitewater to some degree. But that's not all we're going to be doing, but in the short term, that's where we're attempting to focus our energies. So our goal is to build some momentum with the Agricultural Committee and provide resources for these landowners and implement erosion and buffering best management practices. Our Science Committee's done evaluations of shorelines, and we've have municipal drains. We've looked at the municipal drains, and we've referenced best management publications, and we've also been working closely with Algonquin College on riparian zone assessments, and particularly Les Hills Farm last fall. There was an assessment done of his farm in the township, and a report prepared on that. And anyway, and there was actually some on the ground work there too. But it's going to take some time to develop these scientific activities, specific activities. But our goal is to build on the seed donation received from one of the seed companies, and further engage farm owners in expressing interest and use of available resources in that program. So we're actually working with farmers to encourage them to establish buffers along the watercourses and not crop right up to the edge of the watercourse. And one of the solutions we're looking at is actually providing them with seed, so they can keep a portion of the buffer in a pasture land, which actually can be used for cropping. So, but pasture is better than having the crops right up to the edge of the, and we've had some buy-in from some of the farmers on that. So that's something that we're working toward. We've also got the BioCord project, and as recently as today, there was an article in the Eganville Leader about that. We saw the back of Andrew's head in that picture. So, thank you. So, but those are two of the projects that we're focusing in on this year, that we would be willing to focus any resources that you have toward those initiatives. And then the second item, of course, of our funding is related to the importance of just capacity building to help us reach out to the community, to help us put on our science nights and communicate with the public. We also have a Canada Day event that we're working in association with Ted Barron. I guess there's a fireworks display, so we're planning that in conjunction with that activity, an afternoon and evening of a variety of events to outreach to the community, and they would include.
But we're working on trying to get some possibility of some live entertainment, because on the previous years when they've had the fireworks display, that's all they've had. And even to try to get people to sing "O Canada" prior to the fireworks, it's hard to do. So we're trying to get some live entertainment. I've had contact with various things like the Base Pedal Wawa to bring a display, OPP to bring a marine unit. I've been talking to Kirby through the MNR to bring a public relations display for MNR. Even the local fire department has agreed to bring their antique fire truck, stuff like that, for public display to get people down to the waterfront, down to the park. We're working on probably a poker run on the lake, and because Tuesday isn't technically a holiday, we're working to kind of start events sometime around 3 and run till dusk when the fireworks go. So the poker run, we're trying to work it in around between 5 and 7, so the people who are working can still participate, plus the boats all participate by watching the fireworks. So this is another way of getting people involved in the lake and in the water and the waterfront.
Councillor McLaughlin?
Good plug.
I'm just wondering, Andrew, have you approached Civitan to see if they would like to man your barbecue? That would be an idea.
Yep. I've actually been talking to, again, Ted Barron, and he directed me to talk to Felix about arranging for the barbecue, because the Civitan has also helped us out, so we're in turn getting them involved in the same project. I'm trying to get as much community input into this thing as we can, so hopefully we can get something going other than just fireworks.
So in summary, we've divided our funding requests into two categories: projects and capacity building. We've talked a little bit about those events. Other capacity funding issues include our insurance and a contribution toward our charitable status. Now, in terms of the projects, I guess in the long, this is short term. In the long term, I think our objective is to, you know, build on our science base of information and strengthen our proposals, and go for bigger funding, you know, for bigger projects, eventually, you know, but we got to take steps at a time, we have to leverage get the science base, get the cooperation of the property owners, and get the municipal support, but it's all about leveraging and getting. So if we can get in the future come to you with a proposal that that you would make a contribution with, that we could assist and leverage other funds to help implement those projects, we would like to come back at a future date, maybe not this year, but next year, that kind of thing, for those types of initiatives when we're more completed in our strategic initiatives and our strategic plan. But that's a summary of what our proposal is for what we're asking for this year, so I'm prepared to entertain any questions.
I just have one question, is with regards to where Mink Creek is. And why was that chosen as being the best place for the BioCord pilot project?
We actually had another location at
Muskrat. On the Muskrat River, the Rock Siding Road, which is across from off the highway. But because of permits, location, water availability, and location of our existing monitoring sites, it ended up being the Mink Creek one, which is over on Pine Valley.
Yeah, we actually wanted to put the rafts in a location where we already had an existing monitoring station. So then we have to add a new monitoring station upstream,
right,
so that we can compare the difference in the results of the water samples. So if there's an improvement, if the downstream there's an improvement in the water quality as a result of these, we can measure the level of improvement and the efficiency.
Does Mink Creek go into Snake?
It goes into the Snake.
That's good.
Yeah.
Because I think for most of the public, I mean, we see the green algae in Snake River, you know, very shortly after it becomes warm, and I think the question is going to be, you know, why didn't they choose Snake River as opposed to Mink Creek? But if you're saying that, you know, it obviously starts from above and comes down, so
we had it in another water course that actually dried up.
Yeah, we had a smaller Stoker Creek. Was the very first location, but because of the water conditions this year,
it's low.
It's low.
Too low to even accommodate the size of the raft.
Right.
So that was the other thing, was choosing the location, was actually the size and the capacity of the rafts. That they were trying to narrow down the location.
And getting a willing partner to.
Yeah, the other thing was getting access to the land to
Right. Is there any other questions? I believe the Muskrat Watershed Council is here because during our budget discussions, we, you know, said that we would forward half of the monies first, the $2,500, and then upon finding out what their plans were with regards to actually, you know, physically doing something with the funds, the other $2,500 would be sent forward. So is there any objection to the full $5,000? Have they satisfied all of your questions with regards to that? Reeve Miller.
Yeah, I'd just like to say I'm happy to read this article, and that we're concentrated on that area of what ultimately is Snake River coming in, because am I right in saying 60% of the phosphorus is coming in at that source?
Well, you'll want to attend Science Night 3.
Pardon?
You'll want to attend Science Night 3.
I will.
But what I can tell you is that just based on the geography of the catchment areas for the lake, what you've got is two water courses that drain into the lake. You got Muskrat Creek, the Muskrat River, and it's got about, say, 5,000 or 6,000 hectares. Then you've got around the lake with 5,000 or 6,000 hectares that drains directly into the lake, and you got 38,000 hectares that drains out of the Snake. So even, it's not all agriculture. Like, there's phosphorus that comes from leaves, forested areas, and the whole Snake River watershed is not all agriculture. It's just by virtue of the size of the watershed that it's naturally going to have a higher amount of phosphorus loading than other parts of it. Not that the muskrat isn't an important source, because, you know, it is. I mean, there's a lot of development on the other lakes and such, and there's...
Well, one other question I have, we heard Mr. Kirby Punt refer to aquatic filtration of phosphorus. I'm sure you folks have looked at that a bit, and I wondered, is there anything or ideas going ahead in that regard? I'm specifically referring to the Osceola area. Did we not have a natural filter there that way back some time that was moved out by
Well, that's
M&R?
that's one of the big issues, is that a lot of land has been reclaimed for wetland has been reclaimed for agriculture. And even, you know, lowering the dam in Osceola is another topic that comes up from time to time. When you lower the dam, it means you lower the water table upstream, which means more land becomes available for agriculture. So, you know, even if you wanted to create new dams or create new weirs, you wind up flooding land again that's otherwise used for production. So, but creating wetlands is definitely on the table as an option.
It is being looked at.
It's one of the many, like right now what we're trying to do, and we're hoping with the results of our first, what I call a monitoring report, or our first science report from Dr. Rebecca Dalton, is that it'll help us pinpoint exactly where some of the major sources are along the watershed. It's not just the snake either. We're monitoring other parts of the watershed, including the muskrat and the lake itself. But yeah, we're hoping that it's like a scoping down exercise that'll help direct us to where we should be focusing our energies.
Okay, great. Watch the phosphorus coming out of the fireworks, though.
Mayor Johnson?
I also think that we're moving in the right direction. I think it's actually kind of exciting, the move and the movements that have been made. This is a positive approach. Just a question. At some point, if we move forward and start to obtain some funding, have you any intention to going to try and reduce the phosphorus that is already in the lake? Is that on the long range forecast sort of thing?
That's a good question. In the lake itself is a low flushing rate, and there's what's called internal loading. There's phosphorus right in the sediment of the lake, and there's some scientific debate about how quickly it releases, so that, you know, like if your glass is half empty, then, you know, you can do all the best management practices in the world,